Hi, I'm Jessica Martinez.
And I'm Cameron Muller. Today we are going to discuss two art pieces. The first piece is a modern work of art, and the second one is from the Renaissance era.
I'm going to start off with an artwork done with Banksy on October 27th, in which he took a stencil and spray paint and wrote, "This site contains blocked messages," on a wall that has been buffered graffiti on it. This stencil took up an entire side of the building.
Why or what were his reasons for writing that on the wall, and especially in such a public place?
He created this work in response to being blown off by the New York Times Magazine. He had written an article about the new World Trade Center saying that the architects should have built a building equal or greater in appearance to the previous World Trade Center.
Really?
Yeah, a quote from the article he wrote says, "That building is a disaster." Well, no, disasters are interesting. He thought that the 104 building was not enough of a response to the 9/11 attacks.
Well, what is so wrong with the new building, or what are his expectations for it?
Banksy's opinion was that for such a tall structure it lacked self-confidence and a spine. So pretty much it looks like as if it never wanted to be built in the first place. It reminded him of a sore thumb, or a really tall kid at a party awkwardly shifting his shoulders trying to not stand out from the crowd.
Why do you think that he has such a negative opinion on the building?
Well, he believes that this building is a betrayal to all those people who lost their lives. In his opinion, this building gives those men the power to condemn us to live in a mediocre world than the one that they attacked, rather than a more dazzling one.
Okay, but I'm having a hard time trying to connect the artwork he did with the article he wrote.
Well, when he submitted his article to the press, it got rejected, and of course this made him feel like he was being silenced or ignored.
Okay, so just how the artists that made the graffiti had their artwork and their opinions covered up and silenced, Banksy felt the same about his rejected article?
Yes, exactly. The writing he created on that wall was the way he expressed how he felt about being ignored. Just as you mentioned, the graffiti left on that wall was blocked by the city, and he was blocked by the press.
Okay. And the second piece we are looking at is called Judith in Holofernes, a sculpture made by Donatello and commissioned by the Medici family. It's made out of bronze, and originally it was also gilded in gold, but most of that has been worn away, except for part of the sword. It was also one of the first freestanding bronze statues made in the round.
What do you mean by in the round?
That means that the piece can be viewed from all sides and is surrounded by open space. And here we see from the front view Judith beheading Holofernes. But to really understand the sculpture, it's helpful to know the story behind it. Holofernes was an Assyrian general and a tyrant compared to Goliath or even the devil. And Judith, on the other hand, is a God-fearing woman, self-controlled, humble, and the savior of her people, who Holofernes was going to attack and most likely kill.
So, how did these two opposite people get to this point that we have in this sculpture?
Well, the story goes that because Judith was very beautiful, Holofernes took an interest in her. He took her into his tent where she wined and dined him into a drunken stupor.
Even his body language looks like he's drunk.
Yeah, his arms are limp at his sides and his face looks like he's asleep or not really aware of what's happening to him. And because he was so incapacitated, Judith was able to take this opportunity to end this tyrant's reign and save her people and beheads him with his own weapon.
For beheading a guy, she doesn't look all that distressed about it.
Yes, instead she seems like she's contemplating what she's doing, perhaps even praying. I think it's interesting that Donatello catches Judith in this sort of pause. In the story, it took her 2 cuts to behead Holofernes. Here we see she's already made 1 cut down.
But why not show this action? Why would Donatello pause at this point?
Well, there are other versions of the story done by other artists that show where she is holding up a completely severed head by the hair, or she is mid-sliced with blood spewing out that shows a different side of our heroine. But here, I think Donatello is instead emphasizing the symbolism of virtue defeating sin instead of the gore of it.
How does Donatello show these themes?
Well, if you look at the body posture and the clothing, it shows it as well. Judith stands above Holofernes, whose head rests in a sort of unnatural way on her thigh because it's already been partly severed. And Judith is covered quite modestly in long drapes and a headdress, while Holofernes is missing a shirt. We also see these ideas of virtue defeating sin in a Latin phrase inscribed in the base that talks about how virtue and humility defeat pride and sin.
Those ideas don't really seem to fit in with the Medici family.
And I think that's why they purposefully chose this piece. The Medici family, although very powerful, wasn't very moral, but by commissioning and displaying this sculpture that shows the triumph of humility and virtue, they were aligning their family with Judith. But either way, this sculpture really shows how Donatello was a master of his craft, and we ultimately have the Medicis to thank for its commission.